Heriberto Lazcano Lazcano was one of the most dominating, feared, and wanted Mexican drug lords of the past decade, even though he was only alive for the first 2 years of it. Not much is known of his early life, except that he was born into a very poor family on Christmas Day of 1974 in Apan, Mexico, to father Gregorio Lazcano and mother Amelia Lazcano Perez. He had one sibling, a sister called Mireya Lazcano Lazcano. His life as a soldier began in 1991 when he joined the Mexican army as an infantry soldier at the tender age of 17. Later on, he was enrolled in Grupo Aeromòvil de Fuerzas Especiales, a special forces team reserved for fighting Mexico's drug trafficking organizations. This must have been Lazcano's introduction to his future occupation, as it was later certified that Lazcano was working with the notorious Gulf cartel even while in military service. On the 18th of February 1998, Lazcano was detained by Mexican border authorities with 325 kilograms of marijuana in his possession. At the time, he was working as a judicial police officer in Tamaulipas, but was under the payroll of drug lord Osiel Cardenas Guillen. He was not charged. In 1998, after 7 years of military service, Lazcano finally made the transition to be fully under the Gulf cartel's payroll under a paramilitary group called Los Zetas, formed by 30 former military men who came together to be the primary enforcers of the cartel. Although Los Zetas worked on its own, it was a very lucrative partnership with the Gulf cartel. Following the arrest of Osiel Cardenas Guillen in 2007, the Los Zetas organization broke ties with the Gulf cartel in 2010 and became its own solo organized crime entity, and quickly rose to become one of the strongest crime organizations in Mexico. At the time, Lazcano was first in command after the death of Arturo Guzman de Sina, Z1, and the capture and eradication of former second in command Rogelio González Pisania, Z2. By 2004, de Sina was dead, and with Pisania captured, Lazcano rose to the man we know him as today, the leader of the Los Zetas, although still generally referred to as Z3. He was said to have run his organization like a military camp. Lazcano's years in service contributed greatly to the success of his trafficking business. As a soldier, Lazcano received training from both the Israeli Defense Forces and the United States Army. He received training in key areas such as counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, urban warfare, desert, jungle, naval, and mountain strategies. He also acquired skills with snipers, grenade launchers, explosives, and high-caliber rifles. With this training, he passed on his knowledge to the inexperienced recruits, going as far as to discipline them further with hierarchy and ranks such as lieutenant and commander. Under his rule, Los Zetas became an unconquerable terror. Its adequate imitation of military structure and precision, combined with pitiless criminality, made the organization as a whole, and Lazcano in particular, a huge thorn in the side of not just the Mexican government, but the Americans as well. American officials offered a bounty of $5 million for Lazcano's whereabouts, and Mexican officials offered a bounty of $2 million. He was ranked by law enforcement officials as one of Mexico's most wanted drug lords, only second to Joaquin Guzman Leora, also known as El Chapo, who was first on the list. He was wanted for hundreds of murders, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and also for stealing more than $1 billion in oil from Pemex, Mexico's national oil company. Regardless of that, Lazcano's empire thrived. He would go with a small army to regions in Mexico, find out who is in charge of the local extortion, kidnapping, and drug trafficking rings, and kill them. The other men were given a chance to either join Los Zetas or die. With this method of taking over regions, recruiting thugs, street urchins, and former military men, Lazcano acquired an army of about 10,000 men spread across the region from the Rio Grande into Central America. As his empire grew, so did his cruelty. Lazcano was known by many aliases, which include El Lasca, El Bronce, El Licenciado, El Muñeco, but the most common and accurate one was El Verdugo. Lazcano's inhumane methods of torture and murder earned him that name. He was known most especially for feeding people to lions and tigers, which he kept on a ranch specifically for that purpose. Although terrifying enough as that is, Lazcano had other torture methods that would give any normal human nightmares. He was also known to dump people in acid baths. He constantly decapitated his victims with a trusty silver and gold chainsaw. He even pioneered a torture method named La Paleta, which involved brutally and constantly beating a stark naked victim to death with a wooden board. He once stopped a bus full of 72 migrants who were looking to immigrate to America and asked them to join Los Zetas. When all of them refused, he killed them. He threw people into boiling oil and made their relatives watch. When men stole from him, he had them beat up with 2x4 wooden planks and had their accomplices watch while he carved out their hearts and offered it as a gift to the accomplice. He was the first drug lord to openly display the beheaded bodies of his rivals as a warning to other cartels. A reporter once recalled that Lazcano allegedly tied a man to a tree, broke his 2 legs, then left him tied to the tree for 2 or 3 days until he finally died. Protected witnesses also recalled that Lazcano loved to starve people and then watch as he fed their starved bodies to his lions and tigers. He also pioneered the decapitation methods that Los Zetas organization still practices today. Lazcano's regime as first in command of Los Zetas spanned 8 years of maniacal terror from 2004 until 2012. In 2010, after the forced split and break in partnership with the Gulf Cartel, Lazcano led the Los Zetas into a violent turf war against them that left thousands of locals dead across the borders of Tamaulipas and Nuevo Leon in northeastern Mexico. Despite all the trouble he orchestrated or contributed to, there was one very unique thing about Lazcano, one thing that differentiated him from every other drug lord. Nobody in the public knew what he looked like. Lazcano's organization was so precisely structured in ranks and hierarchy so that he was at the very top of it all, and many of his men had no idea they were working for him. He was so subtle and quiet with his appearances, and his entourage was so small and inconspicuous compared to that of other drug lords. There was such little adequate identification of him that when he was shot dead in a gunfight, Mexican authorities mistook him for a common lackey. Before that, there were several attempts and allegations on Lazcano's life. Allegations arose in 2011 through U.S. newspapers The Monitor and the Brownsville Herald that Lazcano had been killed in a gun battle with a Mexican army unit on the streets of Matamoros, Tamaulipas. The articles further explained that the Zetas had chosen that place to hold a meeting with their patronage, the Gulf Cartel, which clarified why Lazcano was there in the first place. However, the U.S. and Mexican authorities disproved the claims. The U.S. Department of State later declared in a public statement that the physical characteristics of the dead men allowed the conclusion to be drawn that Heriberto Lazcano Lazcano, the leader of the Zetas criminal organization, was not among them, which promptly ended the allegations. On the 21st of April 2012, the Mexican armed forces raided a party in Monclova, Coahuila, to capture Lazcano, who was in attendance. The musical group Banda Jerez, who was performing at the party, allegedly dedicated a song to El Lazca, which was supposedly what tipped him off. He escaped successfully, but not for long, as only a few months down the line, the prophecies of both the US newspapers would come to fruition. On the 7th of October 2012, Heriberto Lazcano went to watch a baseball game in Progreso, Coahuila, with only 2 gunmen as his entourage. During the baseball game, a security guard noticed the armed men and called the authorities. The authorities showed up, and in Lazcano's attempt to escape, a gun battle ensued, with Lazcano's side flinging explosives. Eventually, the military was able to catch up, and Lazcano and his 2 other gunmen were shot dead. His body was given over to a local funeral home in ignorance of his identity. That night, gunmen belonging to the Los Zetas organization, presumably under the orders of Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, his successor, stormed the funeral home and reclaimed Lazcano's body. It was an action under a special code of the organization to not leave any fallen soldier behind. The funeral home break-in to reclaim the body alerted Mexican authorities to the status of the man that had been shot dead, and when they investigated using his fingerprints, only then was the full identity of Lazcano revealed. His details have been in the Mexican database from his military days, and that was what came up after his fingerprints were tested. The only photo of Lazcano ever seen alive was a young military man wearing a beige shirt, tie, and jacket, and staring impassively at the camera, revealing nothing of the executioner, by which he was nicknamed, that he later became. The only other photos of Lazcano are the quick photos of his dead body taken in the funeral home before it was stolen away hours later. Although older, wrinkled, dead, and naked, when both pictures were compared, it was revealed that the man in both photos was indeed Lazcano. However, there are still many rumors and controversies surrounding Lazcano's death. Many Mexicans believe that he is alive and only staged his death to get away from US authorities. Others say that Lazcano was simply too smart to have died like that. Rumors have it that he became a DEA informant after he learned he was being betrayed by his inner circle, including the Z-40. Many say that Lazcano would never have intentionally gone up against the Marines and been involved in a gunfight directly unless he needed to. One notable source that debated the events of Lazcano's death is the Proceso magazine. The autopsy report confirms that Lazcano took 6 bullets in total, 2 to the head and 4 in the other parts of his body. A consultant with Proceso argues that if a high-caliber rifle was used to hit the base of a man's head from a distance of 30 yards away like the military claimed it did with Lazcano, it would have shattered his skull. Yet, we have a picture of an intact dead body save for a few bullet holes. Another Proceso consultant pointed out that the picture displays no exit wound on the body's right parietal lobe, despite what the autopsy says. The source stated, "The images are manipulated and were created to pretend that the victim is Lazca." A Mexican senator also once remarked that the case of the missing body could turn into a telenovela in which Lazcano later turns up alive or turns out to be a protected witness. But it is documented that on October 7th, 2012, the world heard the last of Heriberto Lazcano Lazcano, and we preferred it stayed that way. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts, especially on the conspiracy theories surrounding his death. Also, make sure to tap the notification bell to be alerted whenever we post a new video. Until next time.